It's 5:05 and welcome into a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. The North Carolina State Auditor's Office has officially announced plans to investigate the city of Charlotte concerning a reported financial settlement with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief, Johnny Jennings. According to original reporting you heard right here on WBT News, the Charlotte City Council allegedly held a closed-door vote to authorize a payment exceeding $300,000 to the chief. This payment was reportedly intended to prevent him from filing a lawsuit against the city. The potential lawsuit stemmed from alleged reputational damage that Jennings claimed he suffered due to comments made by former city council member Tark Bakari surrounding a controversy with bulletproof vests. In a letter addressed to the Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles, State Auditor Bullock expressed, quote, serious concerns, end quote, about the situation, particularly regarding the potential use of public funds without the appropriate amount of transparency. In the letter, the state auditor writes, "It is my understanding that it is a possibility that as much as $100,000 to $300,000 in public dollars may have been given to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department Chief Johnny Jennings for a legal settlement that may have been entered into by the city council. This is only what has been gathered by the auditor's office from news reports, social media, and conversations. The truth of the matter remains unclear." The city of Charlotte has not yet confirmed nor denied that a settlement took place or how much money was paid to the chief, and continues to claim that information isn't subject to public record. Auditor Bullock noted the Office of the State Auditor will be asking how much money has been reportedly paid, whether a payment exists, and where did the money from the payment come from, as well as several other pertinent questions. The auditor noted even if the payment was worth 1 penny, it should be disclosed to the public in a timely and transparent manner. There is no tax dollar free from public scrutiny. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Fraternal Order of Police is currently in the process of surveying its more than 2,000 members on a vote of no confidence against Jennings. As this story was published yesterday over at carolinajournal.com, no results from that vote of no confidence have been publicly released. However, the very strong-worded letter from Dave Bullock has been. You can read the letter in its entirety, something obviously many of our listeners have been keeping a very close ear to this morning by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. It's our top story this morning. State Auditor probes Charlotte's secret settlement with CMPD chief. Those details again at carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:08. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. An event took place earlier this week in Raleigh featuring former Vice President Mike Pence. The topic of conversation, tariffs. To go through some of the details of that event this morning, Katie Zender, carolinajournal.com, joins us on the News Hour. Katie, appreciate the time this morning. You've been kind of our tariff expert over the last couple of months, walking us through everything. What did the former vice president have to say earlier this week in Raleigh?
Right. So he came down to North Carolina on Monday to have kind of a roundtable discussion with some local business leaders and some local leaders here in North Carolina. And so what he said is, I do believe that what is new here is there is an effort in this administration to bring forward permanent tariffs in the American economy on all goods. He said, we wanted to bring this conversation together in North Carolina so that we can help people count the cost of what that means to the American consumer. The president always says that countries that sell into America have to pay for the right to sell here. And I remind him that it's the American importers who actually pay the tariff. So that is what the vice president had, or the former vice president had to say about it earlier this week, Nick.
Well, and you do bring up that point, and quoting there from former Vice President Mike Pence. Katie, that has been a lot of the discussion that you've been tracking over the last couple of months, whether we're talking about the agriculture industry or the tech sector. It's many of these importers, many of these companies that are based in the United States that are paying the price for that. There were a couple of other business leaders there, one dealing with, I guess, heating, cooling, and some industrial air applications. It seems like it's hitting them pretty hard as well.
That's exactly right, Nick. So one of the roundtable leaders was Robert Luddy. He's the president of Captive Air Systems, which is kind of an HVAC manufacturing industry. And he really talked about, the impact that this tariff situation has had on their business. He said the tariffs have caused a price increase on steel of 25 to 60% more of what they would have paid in 2017. And he explained how, captive air has seen a cost increase in recent weeks. These operations in the market are causing severe problems. And one of the phrases that we're hearing a lot in this conversation is unintended consequences. And Luddy really said that that's something that's really we're seeing a lot of because of these market operations is, quote, unintended consequences. So he said, when free trade in the United States is allowed, as it was established by the founders, it works perfectly. And that was evidenced by the fact that the country now accounts for about 24% of the global GDP. And when we look at the EU, they copied exactly what the United States is doing, and they're having the exact same results, Nick. So that's what really Luddy had to add. He said that most Americans know that freedom produces the highest results, but tariffs undermine that freedom. A weak U.S. dollar creates a higher cost of imports, and along with tariffs, it makes Americans less competitive internationally. Americans are essentially wealthy because of free trade, which is something we've been enjoying for the last 40 to 50 years. We should have unilateral free trade, but there may be some exceptions like China.
Now, Katie, I think it's important to note when we talk about this discussion at the broader level, some of the verbiage coming out of the White House and even comments directly from President Trump doesn't seem to necessarily indicate that they want these tariffs long term. They seem to be wanting to use them as more as a bargaining chip to bring places like the EU, like China, to the negotiating table. But even in that short term, the impacts are still pretty major for a lot of businesses. We heard from Art Pope at the event in Raleigh earlier this week about some of the impacts that it's having on his industry as well.
That's exactly right. So Art Pope was another, panelist on the roundtable. He is the chairman of the John William Pope Foundation. He's also the CEO of Variety Wholesalers. Variety Wholesalers owns and operates a number of discount retailers in the southeast region of the country, and he explained about the breakdown of tariffs and that impact on the consumer or the retailer. So he said, the increased tariffs cause an increase in product cost, which someone has to pay for. That money is coming out of someone's pocket, whether it's the retailer or the consumer. And so according to Pope, Trump is arguing that the retailer needs to eat the cost of the tariff. But Pope is saying, we can't eat the cost due to tight profit margins. And that's exactly what manufacturers are telling me. We spoke last week, Nick, about, or earlier this week, about the electronic industry. And that's exactly what one of the manufacturers I spoke to, said. He said, I really don't have a profit margin. And so they just don't have the capacity to eat the cost of the product. And so if they're not eating the cost of the tariff, then that means the retailer is going to have to eat the cost of the tariff. And so, we spoke a few weeks ago when I spoke with a textile manufacturer, and she was basically telling me the same thing. And, we get this in the electronics industry as well. When you're quoting a job for someone, whether it's textiles, electronics, what have you, when you're quoting the cost of a job or a project, you're giving the customer a certain price, and they're expecting that price. And so they're not going to be happy if you come back, a few weeks later and say, oh, actually, I'm sorry, it's actually going to be this because of the cost of the tariff. And so if the manufacturer can't eat that price, then the retailer is going to have to.
Well, Katie, it's interesting. One of the other individuals there, the CEO of Southern Elevator, was talking about some of the impacts that it's had on that industry as well, and noted that due to some of this uncertainty that you're talking about, and individuals like Mike Pence brought up, it's causing them to have some serious questions about expansion and really moving forward with products and business.
That's exactly right. So Rodney Pitts, he's the chairman of the board of directors of the John Locke Foundation, but he's also formerly the chairman and CEO of Southern Elevator. And he noted that businesses are not going to be making investments when there's so much uncertainty in the marketplace. And that's really the key word in this tariffs conversation is uncertainty. And that's what, another panelist, Chris Chung, he's the CEO of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, also noted that there's so much uncertainty and volatility, particularly, in this tariff conversation. And he noted, that during the panelist discussion, it really took a long time for anyone to even say the word uncertainty, which is, very uncommon in this, kind of tariff war that we're dealing with here, is that uncertainty is a word that we're going to be hearing a lot, and have heard a lot in the past, 6 weeks or so that this situation has been ongoing, and probably over the next 90 days during this, trade deal, and as they're hopefully working on getting a more permanent deal brokered.
Katie, we've got some additional quotes and some pictures from the event earlier this week. Where can folks go and get those this morning?
Right, they can see the whole article with all the quotes and pictures at carolinajournal.com.
Katie Zender joins me this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:15, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at the roadways on your Thursday morning with Dave Hewitt.
Hey, good morning. We are in really good shape.
It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Good Thursday morning to you. We've got some concerning news this morning coming out of a company that was set to add thousands of jobs to the state of North Carolina, Durham-based Wolfspeed. The semiconductor supplier headquartered in Durham faces some uncertainty this morning as it prepares to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the coming weeks. According to an article that ran earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal, the company is pursuing a prepackaged Chapter 11 plan. This is after its largest backer refused multiple attempts by creditors to restructure its debt out of court. You've heard the phrase before. Chapter 11 is a common bankruptcy that allows distressed companies to continue operating while their businesses, debts, and assets are reorganized. The prepackaged part of that means that the company would file a plan it agreed upon with some of its creditors. The announcement led a stock price to tumble to just 88 cents per share, down 72% as of mid-morning yesterday. Wolfspeed manufactures a wide bandgap semiconductors focused on silicon carbide and gallium nitrate materials, including microchips. General Motors and Mercedes-Benz are among some of its customers. And we talked about this company before. In October of last year, Wolfspeed secured $750 million worth of financing from the group called Apollo Global Management, an investment firm. According to the website TipRanks, a website that looks at stock analysis and breaking news in the financial world by aggregating and analyzing data from various sources. That same month, October of last year, the Biden-Harris administration announced that it had signed the initial agreement for up to another $750 million in federal funding to support the construction of a brand new $5 billion silicon carbide wafer manufacturing facility in Siler City, North Carolina, under the CHIPS and Science Act. The company said that it planned to hire some 1,800 workers at that site. But the company has not received any of the funding because it was contingent on Wolfspeed refinancing its convertible notes maturing in the years 26, 28, and 29. According to TipRanks, the silicon carbide chip maker has roughly $6.5 billion in debt, while its cash and cash equivalents balance only stands at about $1.3 billion as of March of this year. Apollo Global Management, which has led the restructuring negotiations over the last couple of weeks, holds about $1.5 billion in secured loans against the company and would be paid back first under the Chapter 11 agreement. The group has the right to approve any new secured financing and was also responsible for rejecting all of the restructuring efforts that have taken place over the last couple of months. Those deals included a provision for Wolfspeed's largest lender, which is a group out of China that deals with electronics, to convert some of its outstanding convertible notes to equity. The company recently notified investors about what they called, quote, growing concerns, end quote, some of the risks there, and cuts in its 2026 revenue outlook to only $850 million. That is significantly below what its expectations were. Wolfspeed had about 5,000 worldwide workers last summer, with a majority of those being in the Research Triangle Park area, RTP, just outside of Raleigh. However, the company began showing troubling signs in November of last year when it announced that it would reduce its workforce by 20%, with most of those layoffs coming from its Durham location. With more layoffs, buyouts, and attrition, that figure now stands close to a 25% reduction in its workforce in less than 6 months. In a report to investors about its earnings in the first quarter of 2025, the company announced a loss of $282.2 million in the first fiscal quarter. The job reductions are part of an announcement in August that the 150 millimeter production facility in Durham would close, as well as a facility in Farmers Branch, Texas, and plans in Germany would be suspended indefinitely. Former Wolfspeed CEO Greg Lowell said in a statement that the company took action in fiscal year 2025, quarter one, to solidify the capital structure, simplify their business to accelerate structural profitability, and support the build-out of their state-of-the-art silicon carbide facilities, including a new 200-millimeter silicon facility in the Mohawk Valley location in upstate New York, and North Carolina material factories that they say will generate approximately $3 billion worth of annual revenue. The company fired Lowell shortly after the announcement. Robert Farrell was named to the position on May 1 of this year, and the chief financial officer is also now reportedly leaving at the end of the month. So taking a look at the North Carolina connection here, not only is the company have major facilities up in the Durham RTP area, but also they've looked at some state money as well. A continuing trend showing a decline in demand for electric vehicles, especially in the United States and Europe, has not helped the company. Wolfspeed is funded in part by a Job Development Investment Grant, a JDIG grant reimbursement under the Economic Development Project Reserve here in North Carolina. In the 2021 budget, the reserve funds allocated more than $57 million for site development for the company Wolfspeed. In 2022, Governor Roy Cooper signed an executive order which committed the state of North Carolina to increase registered zero-emission vehicles to 1.25 million of those on the road by 2030. According to a recent report from the John Locke Foundation, if North Carolina were to achieve the executive order's goals, then the zero-emission vehicles would comprise about 14% of the vehicular fleet by 2030, which, by the way, we are nowhere near those numbers. The state's fleet has grown by some 127,000 new vehicles each year. However, most of those vehicles are not zero-emission vehicles, but internal combustion engine, your traditional gas-burning cars. According to the report, to reach the 2030 goal set out by the Governor Roy Cooper's executive order, zero-emission vehicle sales would have to grow by 38% each year. Regardless of vehicle sales, EV dealers must double those sales every 2 years. Brian Balfour, the Senior Vice President of Research at the John Locke Foundation, told the Carolina Journal, the latest Wolfspeed news underscores the incredibly poor track record of the JDIG program in North Carolina. He continued by saying government officials should not be in the business of betting taxpayer dollars on specific corporations, not only because it is inherently unfair, but economic uncertainty makes it nearly impossible to know which businesses will succeed into the future. A far better approach would be to allow for the corporate tax system to be phased out and eliminate government favoritism of politically connected corporations. We have covered just over the last 3 or 4 months a couple of issues as it relates to the JDIG program, companies saying that they are going to move headquarters, to move facilities to the state of North Carolina, setting themselves up to receive in some cases tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of taxpayer funds, only to have some of those plans fall through the cracks due to things that maybe are out of their control. Like in this case, we're talking about some of the decline in demand for electric vehicles or zero-emission vehicles across the United States. You can read some additional details on Wolfspeed's saga this morning as they are preparing to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy over on our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:30, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Another look at the roadways on your Thursday morning early commute, the latest with Dave Hewitt.
Hey, Nick, we are in pretty...
It's 5:37. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Turning our attention to the North Carolina General Assembly this morning, the House of Representatives is expected to vote today on a bill containing an additional $450 million for Hurricane Helene aid, obviously helping western North Carolina. The proposal, introduced yesterday morning and approved by the House Appropriations Committee later in the day, underscores some of the disagreements that continue between the House and the Senate, as well as Governor Josh Stein, over exactly how much more money to spend on recovery and rebuilding efforts and where exactly to spend that money. Most of the sum proposed by the House would come in addition to the $1.6 billion that the state of North Carolina has already allocated on efforts in western North Carolina. That was, of course, ravaged by Helene in September of last year. But it's only about half of the $891 million extra dollars that Democrat Governor Josh Stein says is needed to significantly lower, and is significantly lower than the $700 million plan put forward by the Senate last month. We talked earlier this week about that $891 million extra that Governor Stein wants to see. Representative Dudley Green said that he and other sponsors of the bill took other proposals into account when writing the House proposal. He said, quote, "Maybe we took a little bit of a different approach to these, but I think there's a lot of similarities in some of the issues that we addressed." Representative Carl Gillespie, the Republican out of Macon County, another bill sponsor, said that the proposal was the product of a lot of listening. He said, quote, "We listen to our constituents. We listen to the folks on the ground. We listen to the folks that have been fighting this thing since the night that the storm came through. And I'm satisfied to report to you with 100% confidence that their voice was heard during this process." Negotiations between the House and Senate will soon get underway on how much extra to spend and whether to roll it into the annual state budget or keep it as a separate piece of legislation to help separate it from the political infighting that often takes place during budget talks. A preview of kinds of negotiations that will be needed, as the governor suggested spending $70 million on helping local governments pay for repairs to schools throughout western North Carolina. The Senate proposed $39.6 million for the same purpose, the House proposing $33 million. So with that, all of the various players agree on the need, just how much money to actually allocate. On other relief ideas, the Senate's $700 million plan contained very few details on what money would actually be spent on, while the governor and House leaders have dug into a little bit more detail to provide a breakdown of where exactly that money would be spent. The House, for instance, would spend $60 million on small business grants. Stein proposed a combined $100 million for small business grants and loans. Democrats on the House Budget Committee praised the inclusion, but said that $60 million is not enough and more funding would be needed. The House bill also includes $50 million worth of grants to local governments for capital needs. Representative Lindsey Prather, the Democrat out of Buncombe County, said that that money is too restrictive and is too strict to help local governments still struggling with operational costs because they've already spent so much on local response. She told the committee, quote, "Buncombe County, for example, has a $31 million revenue deficit. We're seeing school cuts and we're seeing emergency service cuts. All kinds of things that the county pays for that they're not going to be able to use this money." Green said that sponsors considered that but opted not to allow grants for revenue replacement as a policy choice. Governor Josh Stein's proposed $10 million for volunteer fire departments. The House is proposing $18 million for that as well. So there are some disagreements as it relates to where exactly that money should be spent. We'll keep an eye on those details right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. And as that process continues to unfold in the House, we'll provide additional details over on our website, carolinajournal.com. Earlier this week, the North Carolina House of Representatives revealed its 25 through 27 biennium budget proposal. We've talked a lot about that over the last couple of days, with negotiations between the House and the Senate soon to begin until an agreement is reached. We're taking a look at reserve funds, what they are, how they work, and appropriations, how appropriations are allocated in the previous budget to each reserve fund. First, the two statutory required appropriations are the savings reserves and the state capital and infrastructure fund. The proposal would include approximately $36.7 million to the Savings Reserve Fund and $1.1 billion to the State Capital and Infrastructure Fund. That's in page 9 of the House budget. Discretionary appropriations would total some $2 billion. An additional $1.1 billion would be appropriated to replenish the savings reserve to the pre-Hurricane Helene levels, as much a lot of that money, over $1 billion, has been spent out west. Joseph Harris, a fiscal policy analyst for the John Locke Foundation, told the Carolina Journal this move would signal policymakers' commitment to the long-term fiscal sustainability of the state. The Senate proposal, on the other hand, would allocate $1.12 billion to the State Capital and Infrastructure Fund and $44.8 million to the Savings Reserve. Those are in those statutory requirements. An additional $1.1 billion in discretionary reserves would also be allocated to the savings reserve, totaling $1.145 billion, or once again, bringing that money back to the pre-Helene levels. In the House proposal, the Economic Development Project Reserve would receive $250 million, and the Regional Economic Development Reserve would receive $600 million. In the Senate version, $314 million for the Economic Development Project Reserve, but none for the Regional Economic Reserve. So you're looking at right there a $600 million difference between the House and the Senate. This would result in a total of $1.1 billion to the Savings Reserve and $850 million towards economic development. Joseph Harris noted in fiscal year 2024, more than $1.2 billion was allocated to the Regional Economic Development Reserve and simultaneously appropriated for immediate use within the same fiscal year. This approach drew criticism as many viewed it as a misuse of revenue reserve accounts, undermining the intended purpose of setting aside funds for the future. Interestingly, of the $600 million that the House recommends for the same reserve in fiscal year 2026, none of those funds would be immediately spent under the proposed budget. This shift in policy may reflect a direct response to earlier concerns that the immediate expenditure of reserved funds is woefully improper. According to an April 2025 financial report from the Office of the State Comptroller, the Savings Reserve currently holds $3.6 billion. The Economic Development Project Reserve has $676 million, while the Regional Economic Development Reserve is currently empty. All of that money was spent as it was appropriated in the last budget cycle. We've got some more figures this morning on some of those dollar amounts and some of these various reserve funds, major pots of money that we're talking about this morning. You can read some of those additional details by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 546, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We'll take another look at your Thursday morning commute, a look at the roadways with Dave Hewitt.
Hey, Nick, we're in pretty good...
It's 5:54. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Recapping one of our stories this morning, the North Carolina State Auditor's Office has announced official plans to formally investigate the city of Charlotte concerning a reported financial settlement with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Johnny Jennings. According to reports that you heard right here on WBT News, the Charlotte City Council allegedly held a closed-door vote to authorize a payment exceeding $300,000 to Jennings. This payment was reportedly intended to prevent him from filing a lawsuit against the city. The potential lawsuit stemmed from alleged reputational damage against Jennings, claims that he suffered due to comments made by former council member Tark Bakari surrounding a controversy with bulletproof vests. In a letter addressed to the Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles, State Auditor Dave Bolick expressed, quote, serious concerns, end quote, about the situation, particularly regarding the possible use of public funds without the appropriate amount of transparency. In the letter from Bolick, it says, it is my understanding that there is a possibility that as much as $100,000 to $300,000 in public dollars may have been given to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department Chief Johnny Jennings for a legal settlement that may have been entered into by City Council. This is only what has been gathered by the Auditor's Office from news reports, social media, and other conversations. The truth of this matter remains unclear. The city of Charlotte, to this point, has not confirmed that a settlement took place or how much money was paid to the chief, and continues to claim that that information isn't subject to public record. Bolick continued in his letter by noting the Office of the State Auditor will be asking how much money has reportedly been paid, whether a payment exists, and where did the money from the payment come from, as well as several other pertinent questions. The state auditor noting that even if the payment was worth 1 penny, it should be disclosed to the public in a timely and transparent manner, noting that there is no tax dollars free from public scrutiny. He also encourages the city council and really the city government as a whole to be transparent and quick with this process. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Fraternal Order of Police is currently in the process of surveying its more than 2,000 members on a vote of no confidence against Jennings as of publication of this story yesterday afternoon. Those results have not been publicly released by the Fraternal Order of Police, so it's obviously something that we are keeping an eye on, and we'll have additional coverage not only over on our website, carolinajournal.com, but of course right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Well, that's going to do it for a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.